Good morning, Dr. Bhanu. Once again, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bhanumati from CII Institute of Logistics. Very happy to welcome every one of you on the dais of the dais. Welcome to Digital Supply Chain Conference with the theme Winning Strategies for Sustainable Future. We totally have 3 sessions in addition to the inaugural, and we have great speakers in the inaugural session like Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar, we have Mr. Ganesh Iyer, and Mr. Vikas Dubey, Joint Secretary Logistics from Ministry of Commerce. I'm sure the day is going to be wonderful and thought-provoking under the leadership of Mr. Nitin Vyas. It's my privilege to welcome and introduce Mr. Nitin Vyas, Managing Director and CEO of Bumer India. He has been working in the leadership position of Bumer Group India subsidiaries during the last 8 years. He is a member of CII National Committee on Logistics and leading this Digital Supply Chain Conference as chairman for the consecutive 3 years. Happy to welcome Mr. Nitin Vyas, and I request you to take over and lead the day's conference. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanu. And once again, good morning to everyone. Distinguished speakers, invitees, ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very good morning. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all for the virtual Digital Supply Chain 2021 conference with a focus on winning strategies for sustainable future, a very important and relevant topic when we are moving ahead in the industry in different spheres. Sustainable futures is a very important topic for us to discuss, debate, deliberate. I consider it my privilege to welcome Mr. Vikas Chauvet, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industries, Government of India. Mr. Vikas Chauvet is a alumni of IIT Roorkee and IIT Delhi. He graduated from IIT Roorkee and did his post-graduation from IIT Delhi. Mr. Chauvet belongs to 1996 batch of IITS and has served as Chief Freight Transport Manager of Northern Railway and at various capacities in Ministry of Railways and in divisions. Mr. Chauvet has now joined Ministry of Commerce and is closely associated with the development of national logistics policy, digital transformation in logistics, the logistics of bulk and break bulk commodities. He will be joining us on the virtual platform in next 5 to 7 minutes. So we'll wait for him to join, but I welcome Mr. Chauvet in this virtual conference of CII. I also take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Ganesh Iyer, Chief Procurement Officer and Chief Information Officer, Tata Projects Limited. Mr. Ganesh Iyer leads the procurement and supply chain management for all projects executed by Tata Projects, which are spread over the segments like industrial infrastructure, industrial plants in construction and environment, core infrastructure for railways, transportation and transmission and distribution, and urban infrastructure, urban built form and smart cities, and urban mass transportation. He also leads the IT and digital initiatives for Tata Projects Limited, the management facilitations, ERP, productivity enhancement, FinTech initiative, shared services, center of excellence, management, and other digital empowerment programs. Once again, warm welcome, Mr. Ganesh Iyer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me also extend my warm welcome to Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar, Managing Director, Accenture. Mr. Vishwesh is a Managing Director, Accenture Global Consulting Practice. His current focus is on making end-to-end value chain responsible and sustainable. So relevant for our topic today. He has more than 2 decades of experience. He has assisted large number of local as well as global companies across their strategy, business transformation, and sustainability priorities. Additionally, he has been actively contributed to thought leadership in partnership and organizations such as UNGC, CII, WWF, CDP, Safe Water Network, etc. He also has lectured with Indian and global academic institutes on topics related to consulting and sustainability. And his articles on sustainability have featured in leading business newspapers. He is an alumni of IIT Delhi and IIM Lucknow. Welcome, Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar. I believe today's session, you will be able to set the tone, set the theme, and then we'll move forward. Before I move on to the session, I would like to talk a little bit about CII Institute of Logistics. CIS Center of Excellence across India are supporting the Indian industry through various services on key areas of Indian sustainable growth to address the need of sharpening India's competitive edge through better logistics and supply chain practices. CII Institute of Logistics was established as a center of excellence in logistics and supply chain. We believe the logistics and supply chain is a sunrise industry in India and it needs a very good focus. The Institute creates a platform for the Indian industry to gain more insight into emerging trends, industry-specific problems, and national importance and global best practices in logistics and supply chain. During the years, Institute of Logistics, CII, has initiated many programs. 4 of the flagship programs I will just inform. TRACK. TRACK is a unique initiative introduced to identify young logistics champion, extend mentoring support through structured engagement, and to recognize talent. Trainees pass through 4 stages structured learning process, get highly experienced mentor support, and learn through peer interaction and cross-industry experience sharing. There is a very good feedback from trainees, and I request more companies to understand the importance of this program and its immediate benefits and encouraging participation. It's getting the people ready for the industry, and that's what we need. Also, in the field of education, CII has started CII School of Logistics, is another key initiative started to nurture and support industry with requirement talent. The school offers master's degree program with logistics and supply chain specialization. Since inception, the school has maintained the track record of 100% placement. I would like to thank all the companies who had come forward to support this initiative and encourage students with job offers. This year too, I request companies to extend their support to the school and, more importantly, interact with the students. When we talk in this session about sustainability, and when I look at the sustainability goals set by United Nations, quality education comes as a goal number 4. And these TRACK and CII Institute of Logistics also help in that sustainability achievement of that particular goal. Further, there is another initiative called MOVE, which has been started. MOVE is not just a simple membership, it's a movement of Indian logistics industry. Collectively, all logistics and supply chain stakeholders can transform the industry from unorganized to highly organized sector and compete in global markets. I'm very pleased to highlight that within few weeks of announcement, there is a tremendous encouragement for this initiative. So far, 50 companies registered and the membership is expected to grow exponentially. And the last flagship, last initiative which has been started is very important and very dear to me is women logistics leadership. And when we again look at the sustainability goals of United Nations, gender equality comes as a goal above water and sanitation, above affordable energy. So it's a very important task we have in hand. And that's why Women Logistics Leadership Program is a participation and support for women professionals in logistics and supply chain domain. And it's very critical for sustainable future. This new initiative, Women's Logistics Leadership, is aimed at supporting women in 3 levels: pursuit of leadership careers, livelihood, and learning. I'm sure that logistics sector will come forward to join us and strengthen women equality in logistics sector. Further, in the days to come, weeks and months to come, there are major digital events which will happen: Global Supply Chain Summit, e-commerce retail supply chain, building warehouse competitiveness, automotive supply chain, and end of the year, the coveted Scale Awards of CII with the 8th edition. About a little bit about the conference. Development of emerging technologies to meet customer needs is now a common theme across many enterprises. Four key areas may be examined by every enterprise: review of digital strategies and new normal, recalibrating supply networks, restructuring supply chain partnerships, and investments in promising digital technologies. I'm sure that every enterprise present in the conference are addressing challenges in these areas. The conference is very special because it attempts to refine focus on growth strategies with specific emphasis on changing digital logistics ecosystem. The conference will deliberate on rapidly evolving digital world, and the technical sessions will include building resilient and sustainable digital supply chain, new age digital supply chain networks, enhancing productivity and emerging ecosystem. And I believe it's not just doing the digital transformation, but doing it sustainable for environment, for society, for economics. That should be the way forward. I hope participants in the digital conference will contribute actively in the deliberations and take back valuable points insight. May I now request Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar, Managing Director, Accenture, to deliver the theme address. Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar. You're mute.
My apologies. Thank you so much, Mr. Vyas. I'll just put up my presentation, so just bear with me for 30 seconds. Is the presentation visible?
Yeah, it's visible now.
No, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, Mr. Chauvet, Mr. Verma, Mr. Iyer, Mr. Vyas, and Bhanumati. It's really my privilege after several years to come back on the CII Logistics Forum and be part of these very important deliberations today. And I'm so glad to hear Mr. Vyas about the very innovative initiatives which the CII is taking forward in the area of supply chain logistics, which is an area of national importance as well. Supply chains are very difficult to manage. All practitioners know this very well. And last year has been actually a true stress test for supply chain leaders. Supply chain leaders essentially try to triangulate cost and capital optimization with the customer service. Disruptions have been a normal part of supply chains in the past. A nearest example is the tsunami which happened in Japan in 2011, and that disrupted global supply chains in a very significant manner, given Japan is an export-centric country. But the last 12 to 14 months, in light of COVID-19, have actually disrupted the supply chains like never before. And this has brought forward three very important learnings. One is there is a fundamental shift in consumer behavior. For example, my mother is 78 years old, and she's very comfortable now buying stuff digitally. So there has been a significant increase in terms of consumers, especially in the B2C and also in the B2B space, who essentially want to transact digitally. And supply chains have to gear up for this almost overnight. The second important thing is really the digital investments. Now, we have been talking about digital investments for over a decade now, but our research tells us that in the last 12 months, the amount of investments which companies have done in digital possibly could not have been done in a decade, has business continued as usual. And finally, as Mr. Vyas mentioned, the topic of sustainability is very, very important, both in terms of the health considerations which COVID brought forth, and more so, this is the decade to deliver. This decade is very important from the perspective of climate change, and supply chains essentially have a very significant role when it comes to emissions, when it comes to pollution. And there is a great imperative, in addition to the supply chain practitioners being kept safe and their well-being being considered, they design their supply chains to really make them environmental friendly. So these are the three key imperatives which have been brought forth. Now, we at Accenture continuously do global research in terms of what is the leadership pulse. Leading companies have been investing in making their supply chains digital, resilient, and sustainable, and they have been able to tide over the COVID crisis very well. Now, in today's session, I must mention, different companies essentially had different imperatives when it came to COVID-19. For example, if you were essentially in the brick and mortar retail space, your demand almost vanished. But essentially, if you were managing a supply chain in the e-commerce space, you were actually facing a capacity constraint. But in both cases, the imperative of digital resilience and sustainable was very, very important. And leaders who had invested this in a very sincere and a continuous manner are the leaders who essentially were able to tide it over. Now, our global research highlights that supply chain masters are doing 4 things differently. And I'll kind of summarize these 4 things, then I'll spend a minute on each of these 4 things. The first thing which supply chain leaders are doing very differently is that they begin with customer in mind. So they base their supply chain strategy on what the customer values, be it a B2C customer or be it a B2B customer. Secondly, masters are continuously investing in digital architecture to understand consumer behavior, as well as the behavior of ecosystem partners, as well as the behavior and the findings in the general macroeconomic and geopolitical situation, and they convert insights into innovation. The third thing which masters are doing is they are very mature in select capabilities, and these are largely the digital capabilities which help them enhance their supply chain agility, as well as building innovations and building security in their supply chains. And finally, it comes to the role of entire supply chain leadership as well as the supply chain team, which is not seen as a back-end function, but masters engage their chief executive officer as well as their boards to make supply chain leader as well as the supply chain teams an integral part of board level discussions and strategy. So these are the 4 things which our global research has found out in terms of masters doing differently, and I'll dwell upon each of them over the next few minutes. So masters deliver experiences which are linked to right customer value proposition, and our research highlights that the value proposition of B2B masters is slightly different from the value proposition of B2C masters. But what is common is aspects of sustainability, both in the B2C world as well as in the B2B world. The consumers as well as the customers are expecting supply chains to become more trustworthy. This relates to matter of fair wages, worker safety. They want supply chains to essentially become net zero. They essentially, which means that the carbon emissions from the supply chain have to reduce significantly. And there are several examples of leading an innovative organization making huge investments in electrification of their supply chain fleets. And third is really about circularity. All of us have experienced, as we have been buying a lot of material on Amazon, the amount of plastic and the amount of packaging material which is quite redundant and is not necessary to ship so much of goods. And there is a huge imperative that there needs to be a circularity introduced in supply chain, because this is essentially good for environment, good for nature, and it is good for pollution. In addition to that, issues of data privacy, connected customer experience, product as a service, and customized delivery are becoming very important imperatives. And leaders are designing their supply chain, keeping these imperatives at the back of their minds. Now, when it comes to investing in digital capabilities, these are the key digital capabilities for B2B masters and B2C masters. And this is what our research highlights, and I'll dwell on B2B masters. These include things like blockchain for contract enforcement, for example, design to margin capabilities, customer and product segmentation, predictive asset maintenance, and cybersecurity and data privacy. Now, what I want to highlight is that masters invest in 3 or more capabilities. What they do is, depending upon their business context and their customer priority, they pick and choose from these 5 capabilities, 2 to 3 capabilities, and then they gear almost 60 to 70% of their investments around these 3 capabilities to make sure that their supply chains become resilient. This is an example of an automotive client who's a master, and the kind of investments they have made in digital technologies in end-to-end to ensure responsiveness, resilience, as well as sustainability. In COVID-19, what happened is the entire semiconductor production, which is very important to both the automotive industry as well as to the consumer electronic industry, got impacted, because as consumers shifted digitally, the semiconductor manufacturers could make better margins in consumer electronics. So the automotive sector was starved in the last 12 months of semiconductors, and that actually had a very significant impact on production of many automotive players. But the leading automotive players who had invested in an end-to-end digital architecture within themselves as well as their supplier network, they could really manage this shortage very well. And there are examples of leading automotive companies who actually showed an increase in production vis-a-vis the previous year in COVID, largely because of this end-to-end digital investment. Another aspect of digital investment, which is very relevant when it comes to end-to-end supply chain management, given that supply chain has a lot of routine work when it comes to warehousing, when it comes to planning, when it comes to order fulfillment, there is a huge adoption of automation and digital technologies. And this is actually creating a very good thing for supply chain practitioners, because it is relieving them of the routine work. And essentially, it is freeing up their time to spend on analysis and innovation. And this is what our research highlights, that digital investments in the next 3 to 5 years, they will free up so much of human capacity, which then can be productively deployed around innovation and analysis and to fuel future growth. And finally, what I want to highlight is supply chain is becoming a very important conversation when it comes to the board as well as the 3 to 5 year strategy of the CEOs. And those supply chain leaders which are doing very well essentially are able to drive discussions with their CEOs in terms of linking the supply chain strategy to the business strategy and getting an appropriate allocation of funds and investments into supply chain. And finally, ensuring that their supply chain has the right talent to be able to design and deliver to the requirements. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I'll conclude my theme address. I thank you, CII, once again for having me in this session. Mr. Vyas, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prabhakar. It was great to hear, very crisp and comprehensive, the 4 imperatives which you mentioned about what masters do, both in B2B and B2C. We'll talk about that a little bit in the end. But now I request Mr. Ganesh Iyer to give the keynote address. Mr. Ganesh Iyer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nitin and Vishwesh. When I was asked to do this, special address, I was a little, surprised, because I am the part of the customer in the sense that we are the people who decide where the value add is in terms of logistics or in terms of transportation and freight. We move a lot of material. We have a lot of infrastructure projects all over the country, and we have supplies coming also from all over the country, especially after GST, with local warehousing and the tax arbitrage that was there in the earlier regime has gone. So now with GST, we have logistics which has a clean slate and a level playing field. Definitely, digitalization in the post-COVID world is going to affect the entire supply chain network, whether it is domestic within India or globally also. Definitely, there is right now a lull, basically because of the business sentiment that is there everywhere. But India, luckily, has spotted what would really drive growth and business, which is the infrastructure. Now, looking at the last 3 decades of my being in industry, we have moved a lot, definitely. The current solutions that are available in the market for B2B supply chains, I will restrict myself to B2B, have definitely improved. In olden days, we used to have major issues at the ports itself, at the import, when the containers would land. And in fact, a small part of my initial career was also involved in introducing containerization. The containerization itself was considered a big advancement, if I may use the word, for freight. Nowadays, we are expecting the modular supply chains with digital footprint to be a given. The supply chain networks after post-COVID-19 world is going to be more and more modular and more organized, and government, shippers, logistics service providers, as well as logistics service consumers like us are not only exploring but are willing to implement intelligent collaboration within the existing networks as well as future networks. I mean, as recent as this budget itself, we have a lot of changes which are staring us in our face, right from e-invoice uploading by the consignor, the e-way bill connect between the invoice and the transportation and the transporter, travel mapping, geospatial tracking. I was pleasantly surprised when the Food Corporation of India is now asking for truck geospatial tracking of the movement of agricultural produce, right from wherever it is loaded to whichever FCI go down, it is going to be stocked in for the next as many months it is required to. Very pleasant surprise in very recent past. Over the last 6 months, we have seen the FASTag implementation and the highway toll going to almost 1 crore per day. This is on the lower side. We are expecting that toll collections through FASTag are going to be double. And all the wastages, all the leakages, all the time lost, and various other things are going to be a thing of the past. Insurance mapping is going to be the next, where there will be tracking in terms of insurance. And definitely that is going to make a big change. This is where the value proposition, where only some consumers really understand the importance and the criticality of insurance. Otherwise, generally insurance is considered as a cost. It's not an investment. Then we have an announcement by the NHAI of having more than 50 highway warehousing parks, which will probably even include truck maintenance depots as well as driver rest places. So all these changes are only waiting to happen. All have been very sincerely announced by the government, and it's for the consumers and it's for the providers to really take hold of these opportunities and turn them into businesses. Data analytics and blockchain, there is not much for me to say. It's definitely going to happen. So it is even more important and inevitable that the consumers as well as the service providers are going to have more and more of these Internet of Things or even behavior mapping in the supply chain really tracked. And this will give a lot of fodder for not only the insurance but also for the business analytics to understand who does what. Uberization of the freight transportation again is only waiting to happen. This will lead from all the chaotic, unorganized sector to the organized sector of finding a transport service. So these are the challenges which are inevitable and definitely going to happen. We will see it in a very, very short and short-term future itself. Of course, there will always be some vested interests, some local geographic interests which will oppose. And definitely the response to change is not going to be so easy. Not everybody is going to fall in line. There will be disruptions in the sense that vested interests may not allow something to happen for some time. But I believe and I have the confidence that definitely these are certain things that are just waiting to happen. The human-machine interface is going to change the way the freight and logistics business work. A lot of wastage does happen along the supply chain when reaching material from point A to point B. All these are definitely areas where the savings of lesser wastage in itself would give you the break even for introducing new technology, introducing new methods. So solutions are definitely on the way. Being our Indian IT space has always been at the forefront. We have found that most of the solutions that are implemented by iconic companies or even these new age technologies, the Indian participation is definitely very high. And it's a matter of time that these solutions come to India faster in terms of lead time. So we'll see many of the technology leap areas where we would be implementing certain things much faster than what we have been doing in the past. New age competencies are also going to break through the digitalization options in the sense that many of the professions, many of the technologies which have been used till now are going to change, and we will see a lot of new age, probably some things that we don't even think of right now. I mean, electric vehicles like EVs, trucking is only waiting to happen. It is going to definitely happen at some point of time. And at that time, the disruption is going to be quite heavy and quite costly also. The government on its side has started with the scrappage policies of old vehicles, the incentive to go into more energy efficient electric vehicles for transportation, both of passengers as well as freight. So I would only tend to think that it is not a question of how and why or who. It's only a matter of when. It's only a matter of time. Believe me, it is inevitable. So let's be prepared for the avalanche. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iyer. Thanks for taking us through the journey of transformation of supply chain in last almost 1 decade, starting from GST to post-COVID, and how digital technologies, new age digital technologies, are going to further disrupt and change the way we are doing the things. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I once again welcome Mr. Vikas Chauvet, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing this event and taking time out from your busy schedule. Would request you to give a special address, inaugural address for this event, and so that we set the tone and the theme for the day, and we take this digital conference on digital supply chain further in the day. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Nitinji, and Ganeshji, especially for a very comprehensive coverage of what the inevitable future, as you've said, is going to be. The only thing that I from the side of the government, the only correction, if I may use the word, I would like to make is that you say that it is going to happen and it is bound to happen and it is only a matter of time. I think we are here together to make sure that it doesn't take its own natural course, but it is accelerated because it is certainly the way we would like to the things to be, and it is certainly the only way that that logistics cost in this country can come down to the levels that we are aspiring them to be down. So that's with that. Let me just start my address. Thank you very much, CII, for this very, very relevant and very important seminar. Important, I say, because supply chain lies at the at the very heart of improving competitiveness and economic ability to do things at a lesser cost, which we must do in order to be able to be competitive around the world. So you know that's where supply chain lies as far as the economic world is concerned. But within the supply chain, the digital initiatives, the kind of initiatives that Mr. Iyer was talking about, those initiatives lie at the very heart of improvement in the supply chain. So that, according to me, makes the conference today and the deliberations that will take place today not only extremely important, from the perspective of what we are trying to do here, and also very relevant. There are four areas broadly that I would like to talk about. One is, what is the landscape like? And I think I'll be brief because I think that has been covered a little bit, but let me do that. I would like to talk about the general direction that the national logistics policy is taking and the wide coverage that it is trying to make, and come, of course, to the digital transformation, which as I mentioned, is at the heart of the overall, scheme of moving ahead. And then maybe, leave you with some challenges which we in the government, look up to the industry to, help with us, coordinate with us, and maybe inform our thinking. Now, I think this has been pointed out that a lot of rapid progress has been made in the recent period, by way of infrastructure development through dedicated freight corridors, through Bharatmala, Sagarmala, Udan, the Jal Shakti mission, Jal Marg Vikas, etc. So core infrastructure, lot of development has taken place in the last 7-8 years. As far as the regulatory and structural reforms, I think also a reference was made. A lot of improvements in terms of GST, revision and axle load of heavy vehicles. Fast tag was being talked about. E-Sanchit, which improves the processes for international trade, and then a lot of improvement on IT front, individually by line ministries. FOIS has gotten better. There is a freight development portal for Indian Railways. The Vahan, etc., have come up on the road front. ICE Gate from customs is a very user-friendly. So each of these ministries has done a lot of improvement. However, the task of moving ahead, it requires us to address certain challenges which exist, and the government acknowledges that they are there, and we need to act swiftly to set them aside. Number one, we have to act in the regulatory framework. The laws, there are right now separate laws, in each mode of transport, and that needs to be aggregated because there is a separate liability regime. There is a separate set of glossary which is used. There are separate processes, and if we want to integrate, we want a single bill of lading, we need to, work on the regulatory framework. The infrastructure itself has been developed so far for the last 60, 70 years, perhaps even more, sectorally. It needs to be looked at in a cross-sectoral, multimodal sort of manner, and that is the development, because otherwise it leaves blind spots, it leaves gaps, it leaves losses of linkage, which are very costly. And as they say, supply chain is a chain, and a chain is as strong as the weakest link. So there are weak links. Thirdly, the way the infrastructure has been developed and the way infrastructure has been used, the common use of infrastructure, which is very essential for bringing down the costs, the shared utilization, that is not there. And the same infrastructure which can benefit other users is not presently being done to the extent of true optimality. IT systems, I mentioned, there's been a lot of improvement and change, but then these are still, you require multiple sign-ons in order to move from railways to roadways, you need to go from one database to another database. There is a separate login ID and so on. So that integration is required. Warehouses, terminals, logistic parks, the locations where the supply chains dwell. So those locations need to be improved in terms of capacity sharing, in terms of total number overall, in terms of some big large scale multimodal logistic parks where all these activities can take place in a transit oriented less transit requiring manner. So that's required. Training and skill. So that is one more area which which has been siloed and which needs to be integrated. So these are basically the challenges that we acknowledge. And apart from these challenges, there are a large number of areas which, because of the way the economy is growing and developing, we need to address those developments and that dynamism in the overall economy. First of all, the freight flows in the country are transforming. The OD flows are changing because certain new origins, new places of demand are getting created, new places of supply. I mean it the other way around, new places of supply with Atmanirbhar Bharat, with accent on development of industrial estates. So new sources of supply, urbanization, rapid urbanization, development of urban centers, development of e-commerce, that is creating new centers of demand. So it is not the same way as the original ODs used to be, and those are transforming. The commodity baskets that are moving in different modes, they are transforming. The leads are transforming. There are many movements taking place over shorter leads. If you look at cement, for example, there are grinding units spreading out, and they are reaching out to a lesser reach. Technologies are changing, and this was referred to, drone delivery, blockchain, Internet of Things, vehicle to X, machines, human machine interface. And I think this is a subject of later in one of your sessions, so I will not go much on that. Workforce aspirations are changing. Truck drivers, we are facing a shortage of 28 to 30% simply because nobody wants to stay out of his house and miss out on birthdays and miss out on important family events for a month and end. So I mean, we need to use technology so that the driver is able to reach back to his house in a reasonable period of time. So those, then sustainability as an element which informs policy on what should be the right mode. Now that is increasing in importance. Sustainability is an important determinant of whether goods should be moved by rail, they should be moved by road, whether they should be moved by inland waterways. So as a factor, the prevalence of empty trips, the prevalence of less than truckload, these are all wastages of both energy as well as release of greenhouse gases without any productive use. So aggregation, full truckload, capacity utilization, these factors are also becoming critical. Planning versus regulation. Cities tend to regulate. Cities tend to, just say that, 12 hours during the daytime, there will be no entry. Now, that is not the way a modern supply chain aware economy can develop. It is possible to allow the flow. It is possible, maybe today it is not possible. 10 years later, 5 years later, it is possible to build infrastructure, to plan peri-urban areas for aggregation, disaggregation, use non-motorized transport to solve both problems, provided you come together and solve, attempt to solve them. And of course, COVID has, brought out the importance of resilience. I think, de-risking of supply chains, changing sources, going across geographies, all these issues have to be taken into account when we frame the policy. Coming to the second part, the policy itself and what are the key features of the policy, I would just like to start with the targets. It's a very ambitious target. We must reduce our logistics cost from 13 to 8%, 5% in the next 5 years. Now, at the outset, it may appear to you as something which is outlandish, but let me just say that a lot of infrastructure development work has taken place, and what is needed is integration. What is needed is correction of processes. So it's the soft part which is more needed. I'm not saying that infrastructure development is not required, but that is what makes us hopeful that we can go for an ambitious target there. We want to reach number 25, at least less than 25 in the logistics performance index. Right now, we stand at 44 out of 160 countries, and that is that is not bad given the fact that we have a lot of transportation cost. I mean, it's a big geography, a country like India. And thirdly, we want to develop our own country specific index for deciding what monitoring our improvements on a daily, and that has to be an online process. And how we are trying to do it, there are supply side and demand side interventions planned. Briefly to state that from the supply side, there are four core pillar areas. One is the unified legal and regulatory framework that we must build. The infrastructure, fixed and rolling, floating, which includes containers, palletization. It includes standardization in terms of physical assets. So all of those interventions, and then light-bodied rolling stock, and etc. And interoperability and all those issues. And then building infrastructure, I'll come to that a little later. Third pillar is digital transformation, which of course I shall talk in detail. And the fourth pillar is a workforce strategy at a national level, both for skilling at lower level as well as for development of professionals who are experts not in their sectoral fields, but across the board, they can take care of the requirements. And the underlying features that we would like to have in our overall policy, and there are detailed, it's a lengthy policy, it's a long read, but the broad features are integration, interconnected multimodal network, optimization, which means capacity sharing and optimal use, standardization, especially of physical assets to make interoperability work, modernization, which includes predictability, visibility, tracking, efficient demand supply matching, asset utilization, smart contracting, economies of scale, so on. Formalization, the industry needs to get formalized, to promote excellence. There should be some registry. And democratization, so that the farmers and the MSME owners are able to reach out to long distance markets and get better prices. Coming to the focus of this conference of digital transformations, which as I said is at the heart of the supply chain awareness and the supply chain transformation that we are aiming. The first fact is that yes, it lies at the heart, and the second thing is that it also has some prerequisites. The legal framework, as I said, is a prerequisite for certain digital transformations that we need to do. Single contract, single bill of lading, harmonization of glossary, processes, liability regimes, etc., has to precede some of the steps that we are taking. But let me just list out 6 or 7 important steps in the digital framework that we are working on. Number one, and the most important and very significant step, is the new way of planning for infrastructure development. The National Master Plan platform, and you will be hearing more about this, in days to come. But broadly speaking, the National Master Plan takes a geospatial look at the overall infrastructure, whether it is transport and logistics, roads, rail, DFC, airports, waterways, whether it is energy transmission lines, whether it is a gas grid, whether it is the commercial infrastructure. So it takes a geospatial look at the entire thing together. It includes the current state of affairs as well as the sanctioned projects. It is, a tool based on a GIS, dynamic GIS platform, and is being developed as a digital master planning tool with project management tools, of course, and dynamic dashboards for MIS report generation, and an integrated look at what where we stand, what needs to be added on a map basis, where there is a provision for drilling down at specific locations to the extent of the land records of specific areas. So it's going to really change, and this is going to be available for all the ministries to do their planning, to insert what they, and this is going to be the way the new works will be sanctioned. So that's number one. The number 2 step is a unified logistics and unified logistics integrated platform, or ULIP. Now this is a single window. As I mentioned, there are separate siloed systems, IT systems of each organization. Railways has one, roadways has one, customs has got one, ports have got their PCX. Now these are all going to be integrated on a platform which is being developed. The work has already started. All of this will be housed on ULIP platform, and the 3 key features of this platform will be: number 1, the integration of the existing data sources, so that with a single sign-on you can move seamlessly from road to rail to port system to customs and so on. It will also, this is being developed as a in order to promote digital entrepreneurship, it will provide through APIs, opportunities to utilize this data and actually develop your own requirement. And perhaps somebody would come out with an e-marketplace for, let's say roadways, or so that is the future that we are looking at. Instead of getting ourselves into the e-marketplace, we have decided that a platform would be a much better idea. So it will enable private players and logistics service providers and enterprises to utilize the data available on the Europe platform. And of course, it will be a unified document reference in the supply chain. So that's critical item number 2. Third is the logistics planning and performance tool. Now you have the infrastructure data, you have the flow data. The next step logically is to interpose these two together and come out with where are the choke points. So this is what is the purpose of the LPPT, or the logistics planning tool, for which we already have started work. And the idea is to identify choke points in a data-driven manner, and then that should inform the project planning as well as operational modifications. Some other areas in which the digital transformation is being attempted is developing a national grid of terminals and logistic parks, to have a registry of all terminals and logistic parks, ICDs, MMLPs, warehouses, etc. Then smart enforcement is one area on which again the work has started. Certain states have already adopted these things. So the idea being that instead of actually stopping trucks to see whether the license is due or not, and other areas whether he's carrying right papers, do it smartly, do it digitally as much as possible. And so there are 67 ways for which a truck can be stopped right now, and we are trying to reduce that significantly, and do more risk-based analysis, more predictive analysis. So analytics is an integral part of that. Secure logistics and logistics document exchange. Now this is again a blockchain based system for which the prototype is ready, and we are already in a pilot stage where the physical change of hands of documents will be eliminated using the blockchain technology, and it will be a digital document exchange which will take place, which will be Aadhaar authenticated as well as blockchain to see the trail. Then logistics rating system, import clearance system for PGAs, port decongestion, digital port decongestion, on which we have started work, a greenhouse gas calculator, demand side analysis, freight index, mapping of cold chain network, including the rolling stock as well as the e-proof of delivery, which is again a big business requirement, so that digitally once you submit a particular set of consignment, you should be able to get a digital proof. So this is broadly, and there is a lot of second generation reforms, including electronic logging device, which will attempt to log the work and rest of drivers, and to make sure that they do not work 16 hours a day, which is bad from the safety perspective as well as from the point of view of making this profession more attractive. Now this is broadly the digital landscape. Just 3 points and I finish. What is it that from the government side, and of course from the industry side, there are so many expectations from the government, and we are welcome to address them. But there are 2 or 3 things that maybe some feedback perhaps during the as a part of the discussions during the day. One is the idea that demand side assessment of individual supply chains is required. Logistics costs of the country are 13% of GDP, but then that logistics cost is an aggregation of various supply chains in the country. And perhaps there is a need to develop understanding of the costs of each individual supply chain, because the weighted average of the same results in. So when you look at a demand side analysis, it should be possible to digitally now attempt to do an activity of this nature, where we are able to identify as a proportion of gross revenue, the proportion of logistics costs in that, and then suggest the interventions that individual supply chain requires. Now, since the interventions will all be supply side interventions, making one intervention will benefit 4 or 5 or 20 supply chains. So that is all right. But then, this is something that we need. If some more work can be done, we are also working in this direction. The second point is the economic viability and the feasibility of having a e-marketplace. Now, this I know I elicited a grin, on your face when I mentioned marketplace, and Nitinji. But the problem with the market, the advantage of marketplace, is price discovery. But the thing is that you have such small players in the group that there is likely resistance. Owner-driven truck may or may not be interested in having his price discovered. So that challenge apart, there are problems of multi-homing in any marketplace platform. There are problems of very low switching costs from one marketplace to another marketplace. Takes nothing. So people would like to have they want to join Uber as well as the Ola one. So they want to have multi-homing. They switch from one to another very swiftly, and there are low barriers to entry. Another person can come in. So what is it that will be the way in which the future marketplace for the logistics space, especially the non-formal, the one that we are trying to formalize, will take place? Now that is the second area, and the third is how the startup ecosystem can be incubated. Especially I was reading in Times of India yesterday. There was a write-up about how deep tech startups they tend to not graduate from the engineering part of it to the commercial part. So that is the third area in which if the discussions can address and inform us. So with that, I come to the end of my part. I wish all success to the seminar, and I'm sure very fruitful discussions will take place on the three areas that you have chosen for the technical sessions. I'm aware that CII has been at the helm of affairs in informing public policy, and I look forward to a sort of report from the deliberations during the day, if that could be shared with me, so that we can also take steps accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. In last 10 to 12 minutes, 15 minutes, it was a power-packed information, and I'm so glad to hear you, because first step to solve any problem is to accept a problem. And from government, when you are listing down initially the challenges on the regulation side, on the infra side, on the common use infra side, IT side, capacity utilization, I think so heartening to see that these challenges are accepted, are acknowledged, and that's the next step of creating and solving that. I think it's bound to happen. When you talk about on the demand side assessment with respect to sectoral or the industry, I think you're very right. When we talk about 13 or 14%, it's not that every industry. There are commodity industries like cement and steel, which have a very high logistics cost as compared to that. Further, waterways are hardly used in India for us, and that can. So yes, demand side, we from CII will try to put forward the information. E-marketplace, what you said is so important, and I believe ULIP, once it is rolled out, ULIP will be one big enabler to get the e-marketplace. But e-marketplace has to happen. Our company globally in Germany has started a startup to do a e-marketplace on logistics. But startup ecosystem, that is also very important. On the targets which are mentioned by you, which you said are ambitious, but I think we need ambitious targets to bring down the logistics cost from 13-14% to 8%, and LPI to 25 from 40. And workforce, what you mentioned, the challenges with the truck drivers. No second generation truck driver wants to carry on or move this work to their kids, and I think we have shortage of truck drivers, and we have to solve. So thank you very much for your discussions. Also, the theme which was addressed in the morning by Ms. Prabhakar from Accenture, he spoke about the consumer behavior which has changed in the post-COVID era. It takes 60 days continuously to keep on doing something, and your behavior starts changing. And moving from brick and mortar to digital space or e-commerce, and maybe combining more of a omni-channel. So these things are happening. And as Mr. Prabhakar said, this is a decade of delivery for us, and we have to deliver responsibly in a sustainable manner. When this e-commerce is happening, there are double, triple packaging. There is a lot of wastage. We need to cut down on that. We need to find that. We need to work. And this is a decade of delivery. We need to bring resilience in digital side, as mentioned by him, so that we can tide over the shocks like tsunami, which came in Japan, he mentioned, and the COVID, the issue which we had. He also gave a brief about what masters do of supply chain, what are the beacons of the supply chain excellence, how do they do, how do they look into the customer mind, how do they insight into innovation, how do they select the capability, and how in supply chain the top leader of the organization has to be involved, the CEO has to be involved. So thank you also to Mr. Prabhakar for giving his theme address, and also to Mr. Ganesh Iyer for summarizing how the transformation has been happening, and it is happening at a very high speed. When we talk about GST, starting from GST, the whole way the supply chain was working, it started changing, and then post-COVID it changed. And as Mr. Ganesh Iyer said, going forward, it will be more modular supply chain, more organized supply chain, and having a digital footprint all the way. With this, I would just like to put two words, and then the conference starts and we end the session. I learned some time back that when we talk about digital transformation, there are basically 4 or 5 golden rules one works on that try to develop anything which is platform based, not just a product, but create a platform. Ensure that there is a speed and scale into that, whatever you are doing. There is a speed and a frictionless customer experience. And customer has to have a frictionless experience, and don't look into what you are making. It has to deliver economies of outcome. So these are some of the points. And also looking into the sustainability part, we need to, whatever we are doing in supply chain, as mentioned, we have a huge responsibility when we move the freight by trucks or by rail or by sea. There are a lot of greenhouse emissions, and we have to work responsibly and maybe look into the United Nations sustainability goals and see how against each of the sustainability goals, the first 10 or 15 sustainability goals, how supply chain industry and logistics industry is contributing. I thank all the speakers, Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar, Mr. Ganesh Iyer, and many thanks to you, Mr. Vikas Chauvet, Joint Secretary Logistics, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much. And we wish all the very best to this event of CII Digital Supply Chain 2021, Winning Strategy for Sustainable Futures. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you.